there's going to be a lot of apps under management. A lot of management is required to ensure that the applications are going to be patched, they're going to be secure, that they're just expensive. They can get very, very expensive as well. Now, what we want to do, we want to look at controlling the amount of applications that are used in a business. Now, there's strategic reasons for this as well, because the more apps you've got, the more management is required, the more administration is required, the more security is required, the more patching, updates is required, and also the more cost. Because if some of these apps require a license and you've got a lot of people requiring a license, it's going to cost the company a lot of money. So what we need to try to do is work with the business to actually understand what is the need of the business around these applications. And can we look at reducing the list? Can we look at getting just an approved list of applications? An approved list where we know this person is the marketing manager. They are the marketing manager in this business. And as a marketing manager, these are the 10 applications that are crucial for their role. And we say, great, tick the box. And it's going to cost them this amount of money. So that we know that when the marketing manager starts in the company, this is how much money is going to be required for their computer, but also for all of their software and all of their software licensing. Then you've got somebody who comes in and they are the finance manager. Very, very different suite of applications required for the finance manager. They're not going to be using perhaps half of the apps that the marketing person is going to be using. The finance person now needs apps that are specific around finance, right? Same for every other department, every other different function, every other person in an organization. So every single person in the company, every single role in the company should have a list of approved applications, approved apps that are only relevant to them. Now, there's one thing to be noting here. It's not necessarily the IT person's job to tell a person in the company or a manager in the company what applications are best for them. It's good for us, for IT people, to recommend applications to them, to advise on applications that may work best for what their role does. But often we need them to tell us. They are almost the subject matter experts, or an SME. They are the ones who are the experts in their field, and they should know the apps that are best for them. The tricky thing is, if you've got a finance team that is, let's say you've got a team of 20 people in the finance team, and they're spread across a few different offices. You then start doing a little bit of an audit and start having a look at what apps the finance team are actually using. And then you identify there's actually 3 apps in here which are all sort of similar. They're all sort of similar, so why do they need all 3 of them? Why can't they do the job with one? And then you start asking the questions, and then they may say, actually, you know what? You're right, we don't need these 3, we can actually make just one. And then what's just happened, you've just saved the company money because these 2 apps are no longer required. So again, it's not your job to tell the people what they need to do, but you can provide advice and guidance around what apps may or may not be useful for them. But then what we want to try to do is we want to look at condensing the list of applications down where possible. Because ultimately, as an IT team, if we're going to be looking at managing and administering applications across a business, we want to look at minimizing the costs where we can. We then need to look at potentially, if you're going to be using something like Microsoft's Intune, some sort of an app deployment platform where you can package apps together to push them out. All of these apps need to be administered. All of these apps need to be secured, patched, all of that. You want to make sure that the security of these is paramount. Because here's the thing, so many companies, and I've seen this time and time again, they take great importance when it comes to patching of the operating systems. They are there, Microsoft releasing updates every single month. Patch Tuesday, they're there and they are patching. They're running the Mac, they're running Linux, and they're patching the operating systems. You know, they're running iOS devices and Apple release an update. They're patching and they're great. But then the applications themselves are overlooked. And this is where it's very, very important to ensure that the apps themselves are patched. Especially if there are vulnerabilities on these applications, they need to be patched. So the more applications you've got, the more administrative overhead and requirements there are to to be able to patch and manage and administer and secure all of these systems. So something that I always recommend is to look at limiting these applications. Condense this list down. Only use the apps that are required. So you working with the business, you need to now start asking questions. Let's say you now have the finance team, the marketing team. You now know this is the apps that they use. Now, by the way, if you don't know what apps they're using, you need to know what apps they're using. You should already know what applications are installed across your fleet of computers. Now, if you don't, you need to get systems or tools in place that give you the confidence that you know what applications are installed. If you're centrally managing your computers somewhere, for example, you're managing them on the endpoint within Microsoft 365, then you can see all of the apps that are installed, right? So you should be able to extract a nice little report to see what apps are actually used across your organization. If you don't have that ability, you may need to go computer by computer, have a look at the the programs, the applications section inside of your Windows control panel or on the Mac, wherever it is, and have a look at the apps that are installed. But also working with the individual key people in the business to understand what are the core applications that you and your team actually need. What are the apps that you need to do your job? These are apps that are specific to their role, to their function. Whatever they do in the business, you need to know the apps that they require. But then ask the questions, do you actually need it? How much does it cost? Is there another application that we could look at that maybe does a similar thing, but is perhaps cheaper? Have a think about all of those sort of things, right? And then condense that list down. These are applications that are going to be required by the business, okay? That's that. You now know the finance team uses these apps. You now know that the legal team use these apps. They're the apps that they need. Then you've got the apps that are sort of required across the board. Every single computer in the business needs to have a core suite of apps. They need to have an operating system, and then they possibly need to have an email browser, a instant messaging video conference like Microsoft Teams or Zoom. That needs to be installed. They need to have, maybe a zipping program like WinZip or WinRAR. Maybe they need an SFTP client. Maybe they need a specific browser, maybe a couple of browsers. Maybe you give them, Google Chrome and you give them Firefox. You give them two of them. Again, we don't want to give them access to absolutely everything. Like, do they need iTunes and do they need Spotify? Or maybe is one enough? Maybe none are required, right? You now need to look at getting a list together. You then know this is the approved list of applications that are approved in this business. So that now you know these are the apps that are requiring management, administration, patching, security, right? If you want to look at now packaging these so that you can then control them with something like Microsoft Intune, you now know these are the apps that are under our management, and then you can install them out. Great, not a problem. The good thing about this is that now you can put essentially controls in place to allow only these apps to be installed on these people's computers and deny all other apps from being installed. Now, this of course comes back to, are people in an organization administrators of their own computers? Do they have local administrator rights on their own computers? Ideally, they should not have administrator rights on their computers. They should not. You as an IT person should be the only person, or if a team of people, the only people who've got authority to be able to install applications on people's computers. Staff should not be able to do it themselves. But let's say in the event that they are an administrator and they can install their own apps, they won't or they shouldn't be able to install an app because that app has not entered into the list of approved apps. So you almost have like an app whitelist. These are the apps that are approved. They're good to go. The business has ticked the box and says, yes, we agree. These are the only apps that we need. Every other application is now within like a blacklist. We don't use these apps. Now you can get very, very fancy here as well. Is if you have a proper application management system, you can create even like a company portal type of a thing. Like Microsoft have some really, really cool options available, almost like an app store, right? Think about the Google App Store, the Microsoft App Store, where you log in and you log into the Microsoft portal, and then you've got all of these apps that Microsoft allow you to install onto your computer. Think about that, but from a company perspective, where now the company has their own portal. The staff member opens up their computer and they log into a company portal with your logo, your company name in there, and then they're presented with a list of all of the applications that are approved, all of the applications that have been packaged, all of the applications that you know as an admin are secure, that you can patch them, that you can make sure that they're all okay. And then they are presented there with a list of all of the applications that the IT team has now determined are approved. And then a staff member can potentially now install and manage the installation and the patching and the updates of their own applications through this company portal. And of course, behind the scenes, when they click on approve, it goes maybe to a centralized place, a server, an app server, and then it goes and installs it all for them, applies the key, and you're all good to go. And that would work really, really well. But it doesn't have a list of apps that are not approved, that only can install applications using this. A little bit like if you think about the iPhone. I mean, a lot of people criticize Apple because they've got the iPhone very, very closed down, and you're not allowed to install applications outside of this Apple store. I know you can do it with jailbreaking, but we're not talking about that. But Apple have locked it down. And the reason that they've done that is they want to be able to have some sort of a control over the quality and the security of the applications that are approved as part of their app store. And they are the only apps that are allowed to be installed on an iPhone. They've done good reason for that. So you can't go and install an app that has not been approved into the App Store. Sort of the same way, but you're now doing this for your company. You're only allowing the apps because they've gone through the scrutiny of approving, making sure that they can be patched, secured, all of that behind the scenes. Definitely recommend look at every app that you've got, because ultimately, if you're responsible for securing and administering these applications, do yourself a favor, do all of your fellow IT colleagues a favor, get that list down, because ultimately the more stuff you have to manage, the more hardware, the more software that you've got to manage, it's going to make it a lot more complex for yourself. You know, you may be thinking, oh, look, I just want to be free. I want to let our staff do whatever they want. They can install whatever they want. We're just very open here. Well, ultimately, the IT team is going to suffer, because if you want to make sure that everything is kept up to date, that everything is secure, the more you've got, the more pressure there is to ensure that it's all actually updated, it's all actually patched. You may need more people, you may need more resources, and ultimately it's not good for anybody if you're just managing an insane amount of stuff that you don't actually need. So look at condensing that list down and do yourself a favor, because that will help you out a fair bit.